Hi, welcome to This Plus That. This is a show about connecting the seemingly unconnectable and why it matters. My name is Brandi, and I'm the host of this thing. I am currently, as I'm recording this, recovering from COVID. I made it out, or I've mostly made it out, I suppose. I uh, I still sound very congested and nasally, but here we are, still showing up for the thing. Um, I'm doing a solo episode again, mostly because the next episode that's going to come out is an episode with Charles Eisenstein and my friend Lauren Buckley. And there's quite a bit in that conversation that I felt like could stand an introduction. And the other thing was that I just felt like um, there's a lot for me around the idea of purpose. And when I first started writing, I I didn't necessarily set out to start writing about purpose, and it's not necessarily the thing I write about all the time, but I think there's always an undercurrent of the idea of purpose behind my work. And I wanted to explain why that's the case. And again, like I said, give some additional context going into the interview with Charles and Lauren. And I guess I would start just with a personal story, which is that sometime last year, in 2021, when I had transitioned from running my own branding and marketing business to going back to doing more of my writing and launching this podcast, I had spent, I was about to turn 40. I turned 40 in October at the end of 2021. And I felt like I had spent so much of my life searching for what I was here to do. And I explained a lot of that in the intro episode of this entire show called Why This Matters to Me. But just to sort of say again, I guess that I had all these feelings like I was this person with a lot of drive and ambition and desire. And I wanted to give, I wanted to be able to give something that was meaningful while I was here, of course, And I say this also in my episode with David Epstein, that I just had this experience in being a human that felt like, oh man, I've told this to my friends so many times, but I felt like this image of God had like thrown a key that was my purpose into a locked dark room, and maybe was standing on the other side in this one-way glass like you see in police shows or whatever. And God was staring at me inside the dark room, like searching around on my hands and knees for purpose my whole life and just sort of laughing at me. And at some point I realized what a terrible vision of God that was, or whatever you believe about, what lies behind the universe. And I started to really unpack that. And there are all these other things I felt like I had had visions in my life of feeling like I was running on a treadmill, but I wasn't getting anywhere. So this idea, well, I guess like in addition to that, I also had this vision of like a cockroach, like I was a cockroach that someone had like flipped upside down on their back, and like their feet were just like frantically trying to run, trying to flip themselves over. And all of those, I guess, like when I looked at it, were these visions of what it's like to expend a ton of energy and never really get anywhere. And even as I'm saying that, I'm realizing why it matters so much to me and why it was so meaningful to me when I came across Charles's work, Charles Eisenstein, because, well, you're going to see. So yeah, actually, let me go ahead and read that to you. There's a portion in his book, Sacred Economics, which I think is really the thing that like really started me down this whole path. And it's not just the idea of purpose, it's the idea of how our purpose is connected to our health, right? And illness and our wellness, right? Okay. So there's this part, and I'm reading from Sacred Economics, in the paperback version, page 206, that says, I'm peeling off a sticky note. It says, the parallels run deep. So for brevity's sake, I'll limit myself to just one. The parallel between our drawdown of the Earth's stored fossil fuel and the depletion of the adrenal glands through chemical and psychological stimulants. In traditional Chinese medicine, in traditional Chinese medical thought, the adrenal glands are part of the kidney organ system, which is understood to be the reservoir of the original qi, the life force, as well as the gateway to an ongoing supply of acquired qi. When we are in harmony with our life purpose, these gateways to the life force open wide and give us a constant supply of energy. But when we lose this alignment, we must use increasingly violent methods, coffee, motivational techniques, threats, to jerk the life force through the adrenals. Similarly, the technologies we use to access fossil fuels have become more and more violent. Hydraulic fracturing, mountaintop removal, tar sand exploitation, and so on. And we are using these fuels for frivolous or destructive purposes that are evidently out of alignment with the purpose of the human species on Earth. The personal and the planetary mirror each other. The connection is more than mere analogy. The kind of work that we use coffee and external motivation, e.g. money, to force ourselves to do is precisely the kind of work that contributes to the despoliation of the planet. We don't really want to do it to our bodies. We don't really want to do it to the world. My cat just jumped down from a cabinet in my living room where I'm recording this. So if you heard that, that's what that was. But in any case, so I read this. Simon, leave us alone. So I basically stopped in my tracks when I read this because I had been going through years of chronic illness, right? And I actually, in fact, I remember reaching out to my friend Sarah, who's this brilliant herbalist here in Denver. And I remember asking her, we were talking about morning routines and stuff. And at some point I had asked her about like circles under my eyes and why those might be there. And, I thought like, of course, like maybe I'm underslept like a lot of us. And tired and stressed and all those things. But I was curious to know if there was some sort of like larger, purpose behind that. Like, was there some other connection I was missing? And I remember her saying something about adrenals and the kidneys. And so those were just on my mind. And not long after that, I read this portion of Sacred Economics. And it just like occurred to me, maybe fully for the first time, that your health might actually be connected to whether or not you're doing what you're here to do. And of course, like I said, I'd spent 40 years at that point, or nearly 40 years, trying to figure out what the hell my purpose actually was. Like, what does purpose even mean? Is it a one-time thing? Is it individual? Is it collective? I asked that question to Andreas Weber in our conversation of the podcast also, right? So it's just like constantly on my mind, wondering what the heck purpose is, how you find it, how you know if you've found it, whether or not it's something that like each individual is supposed to have, whether or not like you do one thing and it's always going to be your purpose, or like me, if you sort of meander around and, like eventually you find it and then you stick to it, or if like the whole thing, like meandering around, again, like the David Epstein conversation and talking about generalists, I've always seen myself as a lot of a generalist. So I just thought like, maybe all of it was the purpose. I'm not sure. I have no idea, but nonetheless, I still feel like I've spent all this time searching for a purpose and feeling, like I said, like expending all of this energy and not really going anywhere, or feeling like there was traction, like again, like that image of me on a treadmill just felt like I was expending a lot of energy and not actually getting anywhere. So the deep internal sense for me was that like, I was putting in all of this effort, but not actually having any sort of impact or meaning either to me or to anyone else. And that felt really empty and not a fun way to live your life. And so, as much as I think that, like, at this point, I think we're sort of always doing our purpose from the moment we're born, probably even before that, there is something deeply meaningful or insightful to me about what Charles was talking about in Sacred Economics that I just read, that is some connection between maybe why I was sick, at least in part, and not doing work that I'm here to do. So then later in Sacred Economics, let me flip to it. This is another quote. And I actually posted this on Instagram. And as soon as I posted it, like, I had so many people DM me to be like, oh my God, you don't have to call me out like that, Brandi. Like, I think it's just such a universally resonant sentiment. So here's what it says. Not only is the experience of scarcity an artifact of our money system, but the laziness we view as human nature is a valid response to the kind of work that system engenders. If you find yourself being lazy, procrastinating, doing slipshod work, showing up late, not concentrating, and so on, then perhaps the problem isn't your character after all. Perhaps it is a soul's rebellion against work that you don't really want to do. It's a message that says, it is time to find your true work, that through which you can apply your gifts towards something meaningful. Ignore that message, and your unconscious will enforce it through depression, self-sabotage, illness, or accident, disabling you from living anymore a life not aligned with your generosity. I mean, woo, that is a word, right? That is a freaking word. And so, hold on. Okay, so there was something that clearly had been working on me, that I had been doing all this continued healing work around, I'm fixing my hair on camera. I've been doing all this healing work around my chronic illness, and years, I mean, like 10 years probably of it. And, you know, I had just been shutting down my business to try to start this podcast and try to focus more on what actually felt like it was bringing me alive. And, you know, I always say stuff like that, right? Like, I want to do work that makes me feel alive. But, like, again, I had also been doing all this work around the connections between aliveness and work. So my conversation with Andreas Weber, again, I'd been thinking about aliveness. What does it mean to be fully alive? And so I start making all these, like, spiritual, physical work connections, that perhaps there is this intrinsic link between our adrenals, our literal energy and sense of aliveness, like how much vitality we actually have in our daily lived experience, and the work that we're doing. So again, I guess, like, going back to Andreas's conversation, when I had read Matter and Desire, an erotic ecology by Andreas, which is what we talk about a lot in that conversation, I had seen the literal difference between when I did work in the world that gave me more energy. Like, I had an actual experience of knowing that there was a tangible difference between when I would do work that I hated, that I would come home and feel drained from. Usually it was come home because I'd be working for someone else. So that's not always the case, obviously. Like, you can do work for other people that's deeply meaningful and is actually in your purpose. And I hope you do that, because I think some of the best work is collaborative, right? But in any case, I had seen the tangible difference between doing that work that was not meaningful to me, that just felt like it was making me money, and being utterly tired, even though it was like easy work for me, right? Like, it wasn't even that difficult. I at that far into my career, it was easy for me to be doing what I was doing. I was pretty good at it, but I was tired nonetheless every day, emotionally, spiritually, physically. So the difference between that and waking up every day and doing work, or not even every day, like I had just seen on a couple instances stuff that like actually made me come alive, where in most circumstances I would be tired, but I would come home and I'd be so filled with this energy that it felt like I could run around a neighborhood, right? Which is just like odd for me in chronic illness because fatigue is such a big deal for me. And so when I come across these passages in Charles's work, it really hits home. Like I start to realize that, especially after the previous year of trying to run this virtual, marketing and branding coaching business or whatever, having panic attacks, being exhausted, hating it, losing sleep all the time, not really feeling at rest, et cetera, et cetera. Like the list goes on, that it was actually killing me. And that when I started doing this work again, the podcast for the first time and picking my writing back up, something changed. And so, yeah, like I said, I just started to weave all these connections between work, aliveness, and health, right? Like what purpose actually has to do with our health. Because like Charles is saying, when you're not actually doing that, there is something like in actually even ancient belief systems like Chinese medicine, that it is draining of your life force, and that the world and economic system that we live in is actually set up to do that, right? Like we are not set up in a way that we can thrive. And so part of what I love about Charles's work, and that has sort of launched me on this path also, is the idea of living in the gift. The idea being that today, most of the time, we're just like fighting in this endless war for resources, right? That like enough for me means that inherently you don't have enough. And actually, Charles does this incredible job in Sacred Economics of explaining why in any interest-based economy, including capitalism, but not just capitalism, that inherently there are some people that will be left without and other people that will have too much or much more, right? And so there's a growing economic gap that can't be fixed in an interest-based economy. And so we are inherently living in an economic system that has us fight for our individual thriving rather than collective individual thriving and liberation. And also what would then, of course, like he said, lead to the health and liberation also of the planet, instead of the destruction of the planet's resources in the same way that we are destroying our own internal resources. Right. And so I don't need to belabor that. I think that's enough, but I do want to actually read something that I wrote that felt like my best, I guess a couple things that are like some of my best articulations of where this all started to come together for me and why I think this is so important. So I'm going to read something that I wrote in my newsletter. So it's published online, but I wanted to actually read it for anyone who prefers listening rather than reading, or just as a refresher if you read it before, because I think it not only gives great context to my conversation with Charles and Lauren and is something I reference in that conversation, but I just want more people to hear it because I'm just so passionate about it. So forgive me for reading my own work, but here it goes. It's called A Sick Society Plus an Individual Burden. And it starts with a quote from Rupa Maria. I'm not actually quite sure how to say that. Forgive me. And Rajiv Charles Patel, who wrote a book called Inflamed, Deep Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice, which says, our individual healing is connected to the healing of our society and our healing of the ecosystems upon which our lives depend. To engage in this holistic vision is to practice deep medicine. So here's the start of my essay. I could tell I was about to sob. We're practically strangers, and she's going to think I've lost it if I burst into tears as soon as we start. My laptop sat in the middle of the living room, balancing atop a makeshift standing desk I'd constructed out of a rickety cabinet, a small Rubbermaid container, and one of those cardboard packs that grocery stores use to ship frozen burritos in mass quantities. Scheduled to meet once more with the new coach I'd hired for a 3-month endeavor to tackle ongoing autoimmune issues, symptoms that refused to cave to any prior remedies I'd already thrown their way, I knew I was about to break. 21 days in, having eaten soup with boiled meat and veggies for every meal, and still processing all of the isolation and financial insecurity and growing civic unrest after the murder of George Floyd, helicopters flying overhead outside and the Colorado mountains on fire, the ability to keep my shit together had finally faltered. So, as soon as her video flickered on, I let the tears come and the frustrations fly. It wasn't just that I couldn't take eating the same thing all day, every day, or even our most pressing global crises, climate collapse, a virus run amok, crumbling democracy, and institutional racial injustice come to bear all at once in our daily lived realities. Instead, what came spilling out of me had more to do with our intolerably sick society and the way we must bear the burden of its disease so individually. We are sick, and we often endure the cost of it alone. Preventative measures to ward off illness, and the price of care when disease finally comes. Thanks to the pandemic, I temporarily stopped working, aided by the help of a business-related PPP loan. Taking care of my health, taking care of my health felt like a full-time job, and I decided to admit that's what it was. I started to acknowledge, too, that much of the reason any of us think otherwise is that we have outright ignored our screaming bodies for so long that we consider our symptoms normal or excuse them away as aging. If you haven't made the metaphor yet, sickness and disease don't just describe our physical ailments either. In any case, living alone and having no opportunity to go anywhere or see anyone made it both more accessible and more challenging. Easier, and that I wouldn't be forced to tell friends no when they invited me to socialize at a restaurant that couldn't accommodate my dietary needs, which was all of them. Harder, and that I was, well, truly alone. Every chore, every meal, every grocery bill, every ounce of chicken stock, everything I had to ferment, every detox bath I needed to draw, all of it. It was all on me. On me to accomplish, on me to cover financially, on me to process mentally and emotionally. No surprise, but surviving in a society that makes you sick is costly and time-consuming without the benefit of community. There's all the metal-laced water and soil, the smoky air, the moldy homes, the radiated phone signals, the surface-level relationships, the hyper-sterilized offices, and the chemical-laden sheets. When a white woman who isn't even working can't pull off the rigors needed to heal, you see with razor-sharp clarity how profoundly broken it all is. How profoundly broken it all is. That was evident to me before, but it became even more apparent. Our problems are systemic, chronic, and epidemic in scale, and we cannot heal in isolation. In fact, separation isn't just why I couldn't heal. It was what was making me sick in the first place. My whiteness is part of it too. Whiteness and our economic systems embody a story of separation and individualism, a truly colonial project. So many other cultures over millennia and still today, most of which are people of color or pre-industrial, operate more collectively. I can't be the only white person who has seen a local QT BIPOC gathering advertised and knew I was missing a kind of connection and joy they share. So when I got that call, I was furious. For me, but also for all of us too. Especially those who didn't have as much access as I did. Not everyone has the time or money to learn which filters clean our water, which foods genuinely nourish us, how to cook food so that its nutrients are more bioavailable, or what healing herbs lie right outside our door. As if my individual decision to recycle, walk to work, or change this word to that word alone is enough to counteract all of the ways that society-level separation makes us sick every day anyway. As Rupa Maria, again, don't know if I'm saying that correctly, I'm so sorry, and Rajiv Charles Patel say in Inflamed, this damage of colonialism of separation is a consequence not of individual choices, but of the mandates of a certain social, economic, political, and environmental ecology. To see these connections and then repair them is not to pine for a pre-industrial lifestyle. It is instead to reject the logic of personal responsibility when so much of what shapes our health is beyond individual control. Yes, individual growth requires taking personal accountability and, standing at our desks more often. This plus that, after all. But rugged individualism ignores that I shouldn't have to buy an Apple Watch to understand that the nature of my work shouldn't be killing my body. There is enough there is not enough walking I can do to counteract a work culture that mandates constant sitting or standing in place. There are not enough bubble baths in the world to eradicate the stress caused by overwork, poverty, and unaffordable housing. There is not enough therapy to talk through our everyday traumas and concerns when our friends are equally too busy or too far away and too under resourced to show up for each other consistently. There's no amount of language policing that will account for my disconnection from the people and the people my language harms. There is not enough massage to deal with our lack of touch. There are not enough sex workers on the planet to cope with a world so depleted of real, lasting intimacy. This disconnection is at its core a spiritual problem. Sin, in fact, and I say this, I mentioned this, I think I cut it out, but there's a part at which in my conversation with Charles, I talk about this in terms of, well, I'm about to say it. Here it is. Sin, in fact, is a word that initially signified a separation. Whatever you believe, the ancient root of any spiritual tradition teaches that separation or sin is not about all of the actions we avoid to assure our place in some supposed future heaven. Separation is the way we create hell here now. It follows then that connection and building community are how we usher heaven into our lives today and 7 generations into the future. Community, reconnection at every level is our salvation. What might that look like practically? Radical impracticality in a world that teaches us that separation is normal. Reintegrate the pieces of yourself you've exiled to belong, vulnerably displaying all of the weird parts of you that feel like they've never fit into any clean narrative. Learn how to hold conflict so that we stop exiling each other, even the straight white men. Befriend your local farmer. Refuse to do what your body says no to any longer because you know self-abandonment is self-disconnection and that you must connect with yourself authentically before you can create lasting community with others. Give away what makes you come alive, man. Give it away. The work you feel most compelled to do without expectation for an exact payment or payment at all, and see how community starts knocking down your door. When someone asks you for a coat, give them the shirt off your back also. When immigrants ask for entry, throw open your doors and feed them too. Pay for a friend's meal when they're having a tough week. Meditate for 6 hours a day because you can't afford to keep ignoring your inner knowing. Start a real relationship with the microbes in your gut, your mouth, and all over your body. Get to know the soil teeming with life outside your door. Care for your elders. Learn the names of trees. Stop planning and start napping. Trash your lamps and go to sleep with the sun. Cancel your streaming services and journal instead. Trade tomatoes with your neighbor. Study the foodways of your ancestors because building relationships backward in time mystically heals your present moment. Teach dance to inmates who might never see the light of day again. Build transformative justice networks so that prisons become a thing of the past. Talk to the rivers. The nature of the universe is paradox, friends, and it's time to start doing what doesn't make logical sense. As for me, I believe I'm selling my house to afford to save my body. We talk about that a lot in the conversation with Charles. It's devastating, but I see no other way forward. Money or health. We choose money nearly every day, and my body can no longer suffer it. Even if your dis-ease has yet to turn medical, it has probably already infiltrated every cell of your body. If a chronic illness or disability hasn't radicalized you yet, there's a good chance it will do so one day. And if you find all of this far too dramatic, consider that you maybe aren't sick enough yet to acknowledge the truth. Your symptoms aren't loud enough, and perhaps you haven't realized your connection to the health of all things. I urge you to turn before you get there. I want you, and I want us, to choose a new way. Hi, Simon, again. I want us to turn toward life. He's behind my computer right now, readjusting, and it's moving the computer. So I'm just holding it here, hoping he doesn't knock it on the ground. All right, we're close to the end. I want you and I want us to choose a new way. I want us to turn toward life. Reanimate all of life and watch how it reanimates you. And if you fear the abandonment of family and friends or the terror of poverty in making these choices, hear me loudly when I say, I know this loneliness deeply. Hear me when I say I understand financial distress. There is definite, real, visceral grief across even. But how poor can you be if you finally start to live a truly rich life, thoroughly connected to all of the magic around you and what makes you genuinely come alive? That is eroticism. Those of us who have only just begun to tiptoe into this abyss are here to grab your hand when you finally do. This is only the beginning. We are just now learning, not ahead or behind, but alongside you, ready to brave the desert in search of a new world. Thank you for listening to that. I know it was a bit long, and I don't enjoy just reading things I've already written to you necessarily, but I'm reminded of a few things in reading that back. One is, of course, just the context of selling my house. It's a bit later now after writing that, and then also the conversation with Charles and Lauren has already been recorded where we talk about this. But to give you more context and an update on that, I am indeed still working on selling my house. I am still working on getting the dental procedures done. I think I'm going to read a bit about that to you in a second also. But yeah, I have become, if it's not clear, entirely convinced that not doing work that makes you come alive is part of why we're dying. Because I now have this like inherent belief that we were put here for a reason. And there is stuff in us that we are here to do and to give to other people. And when we don't do that, I've talked about this before, but like Brene Brown says, unused creativity begins to metastasize in our body. I quite literally think that when you don't do work that makes you come alive, it makes you sick because it's being held in there, just like trapped emotions, right? We're starting to know scientifically that trapped emotions actually get lodged in our body, and that actually does start to become sickness. And I think there's something that's inherently in the same way connected to doing our work that we're here to do, and not doing it making us very sick. And I'm laughing because I'm again sort of messing with my hair on camera. It's such a mop. I like after a week of COVID and at the end of a cycle, but before I'm about to get my hair cut. Anyway, this is me and my queerness being weird about my hair as I'm recording. But anyway, I just, what do I want to add here? I just think there's something about the health of our collective community that like, it doesn't just individually make us sick, but it makes us sick collectively when we aren't giving to others what we're here to give to the world. Because I think that the reason that you're here to give it is because people desperately need it. Oh my gosh, what was that quote? Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it up on my phone. I saw Adrienne Marie Brown repost this the other day, and I took a screenshot of it. I don't know the source, but it's someone on some sort of meme or something just said, I just told my wife, quote, I'm sorry we have to raise children in these dystopian times. She recalled a quote she read just today. Never feel sorry for raising dragon slayers in a time where there are actual dragons. And like, listen, I think we're all dragon slayers. I genuinely think that like this world is dying. Like the earth is being depleted. We're being depleted. And we are genuinely dying, not just metaphorically, but literally, not in the millennial sense of the word literally. I mean, literally. I think we are dying, and we are in desperate need of everyone to do work that makes them come alive, because when you do that, it makes other people come alive. And when you don't, something key that's needed in the aliveness of the universe goes unused. It goes untapped. It metastasizes. It makes you sick for not doing it. It makes other people sick for not having it. And it lets the dragons keep living. We have dragons to fucking slay, people. Like, the climate is a mess. We are literally living in apocalypse. Social unrest is everywhere. And we're just gonna like sit in our fucking day jobs that we hate. I mean, it's one thing if you love it, like, please God, keep keep doing work, any work that makes you come alive, like I said. But like, I genuinely think that part of how we get to collective wellness, like I just think that there is a missing piece in our conversation about wellness and health, where we talk about like reduction of stress and eating all the right things and all of those things, that is deeply connected to community. That genuinely, like they say in Inflamed, we cannot be individually well in a society that is sick. So if anything, doing work that doesn't make you come alive, that actually inherently makes you super drained, is it at the very least a cause of stress, right? And so, again, like more than that, I just think that like, at like a global level, we are in a moment when it is necessary to understand that we have been living, Charles talks about this, in a story that has told us that the only way to survive is to hoard all of our individual resources, to care only about our own individual needs, and to take care of our own individual families. And I actually think that that level of separation is making us sick. And part of what comes up in that thing that I just read you, that I wrote about sick society plus individual burden, is that part of the separation is with ourselves. And listen, when you are doing work that you do not like and you are aware of it, subconsciously, consciously, whatever it is, there is something in that about being disconnected from yourself. Like the level of cognitive dissonance and physical dissonance to ignore the symptoms that you're experiencing and the emotional turmoil that you are experiencing when you are in work that you do not like. Maybe not even love, but at the very least that like you do not like and you know it. You are so separated from yourself that I think that is causing sickness. And you're then collectively so separated from what the world needs out of what you have to give to people, that that separation is causing a sickness, both individually in you and collectively in the rest of us. And so I am just utterly convinced that you doing something, and I don't care if it's a side job, I don't care how you got to manage it. If you're not like willing or ready to live entirely in the gift and be like, screw it, I'm quitting my job. I'm giving away all my things. I'm just going to start giving all my work away for free. Listen, go take Charles's living in the gift course. Like it's a brilliant primer on like the way that we would both say that like that is not the necessary way to go. Right. But regardless, no matter where you are on this journey, I'm just so adamant about what it means to actually start living into your purpose, because I think we are all sick, you and the rest of us included, and we will not be well until you do. And, you know, I was talking with my friend Stephanie, who's a mutual friend of mine through my friend Deanna, because she had reached out to me after I started doing this writing again. And, you know, she had said like, I don't know, she was talking to me about how she's mixed race. And so she's always sort of felt like this plus that kind of person, right? Like she's never fit fully in one world, but she sort of understands the language of both. And now she's been thinking about like, she's like stuck in this job. And I think she quit actually in December, but she had been stuck in this job that she didn't love. And she was planning on quitting and she wanted to talk to me about it. And so it was at some point in conversation, we got to this point where she was like, I think I'm gonna, like, I think part of what I really want to do is be a doula. And I was like, girl, I got news for you. But the fact that you were literally born into this world across two cultures, we're going to call like being mixed race, you're across two cultures, whether you were born in another country or born here, right? You have existed between two cultures continually. And now you are literally wanting to be a doula, where you will exist between two worlds, between before life and life. And you are going to usher life into this world, right? And I started to see even for myself that like part of this podcast might be speaking to you. And you might be the kind of person who was born to heal a divide between two worlds. Like maybe that's part of what you have to give and being a this plus that kind of person. You can do this and this other thing. And there has often been a divide between those. And I think that often is the dragon we're here to slay. That we are here to build capacity for complexity and nuance, and to say we can hold all of these things at once. We don't have to be any one thing, but that part of that is that your magic might actually be some form of healing a divide between two worlds, whether that's adults and children or the business world and the nonprofit world, like whatever that is. I think you might have a magic, if you're listening to this, that is at the center of those things. Just like I have a magic that is making connections between things continually, right? So whether that's true or not, I just want you to actually start doing it. It is what you're here to do, and to do it in a way that feels manageable to you. Like it might be a process to get there. And I'm guessing that, again, like you already actually are doing your purpose everywhere you go, because it's like impossible for any of us to not be who we are. But I think that part of the work is to heal the divide between our internal knowing and our external actions, right? So like Charles says, that the more you continue to do the thing that even your subconscious knows that you don't want to be doing, your body will actually start to tell you louder and louder and louder and louder until you finally listen that there is a divide between what you want and what you're actually doing, and that you're going to continue to be increasingly sick until you do otherwise. So there's that. And then just, I think, again, as more of like a primer going into the conversation with Charles and Lauren, that I wrote a piece. Yeah, I guess I'll read it. It's called Wisdom Teeth Plus Chronic Illness, that I think is specifically relevant to that conversation and to update you more on where I'm at with that journey. So, okay, so it starts with a quote, just like I try to do everything, from Julia Enders, who wrote a book called, wait for it, Gut, the Inside Story of Our Body's Most Underrated Organ. And there's a chapter in it on the gateway to something, I forget what it is, but it's about your mouth. Maybe I quote it in this, so maybe you'll hear it in a second. Okay, so yeah, the quote is, the mouth is simply the gateway to a world where the external becomes internalized. That's one part of the chapter I'm trying to remember the title of, but it's something about gateway. Anyway, I'm going to give a bit of a disclaimer here, again, like I did at the beginning of this newsletter, which is that I'm not a doctor. Take your own sort of talk to your people about the medical decisions that you choose to make, and actual professionals, because that's not me. I'm just sharing my experience. Okay, so here's how it goes. Here's the story of my teeth and how I've made the connection between teeth and the chronic illness I've been experiencing. So like most elder millennials in the United States, I had my wisdom teeth removed sometime in high school. As procedures go, it appeared to carry on as planned. Unconscious for the whole thing, I only remember recovering afterward, strewn across our living room couch, mouth filled with bloody gauze, probably watching ESPN or My So-Called Life while my parents were at work. Normal. This was the normal picture of a young teenager in this country. Life went on like normal after that too, and I went on to university. It was there in college, though, that I developed my first persistent physical experience of anxiety. That seemed relatively normal too, given I was an underslept college kid with more on my plate than ever before. Plus, anxiety is just an emotional problem, right? It was just stress, surely. Around the same time, I also developed a heart arrhythmia. Again, probably stress, right? I didn't have seasonal allergies until then either. Probably just an environmental change from Texas to Arkansas, where I moved for school, right? Maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe it was something else. Or maybe those things were more intensely triggered by a related problem already happening within me. Still, life continued. I eventually graduated without any additional known symptoms and came back to Colorado, where my family had moved after freshman year. As health stories go, it would take too much to provide a rundown of all the diet and lifestyle changes I tried between then and now, desperate to find solutions to my growing list of health challenges, all of which are part of my whole health picture. Let me take a drink. Hold on. Okay. What I will say, though, is that I eventually developed a series of symptoms that seemed too low grade to truly concern any Western medical doctors and too complexly related for even functional medicine practitioners to untangle, including an underfunctioning thyroid that doctors still refuse to acknowledge despite a growing population of benign nodules on the gland, terrible sleep, sleep apnea, and at times sleep paralysis, leaky gut, malnutrition, chronic fatigue, brain fog, food allergies, panic attacks, depression, acid reflux. That one came with a 2-year cough. Eczema, low blood pressure, unexplained weight gain, cold fingers and toes, irritability, severe physical stress before every period, small red bumps all over my legs and arms. The list goes on, honestly. Many of those aren't officially diagnosed because most of the medical community isn't looking at the whole picture, doesn't believe the symptoms are real, or uses faulty standard ranges to determine whether something's wrong with you. That makes it pretty impossible to feel like you're not either crazy, imagining your own symptoms, or like you have any real control over getting better. And most things in that list, pretty normal for your average adult, right? Tired and stressed, depressed in a world falling apart, anxious at all of our individual burdens and global catastrophes. I mean, of course we're exhausted, right? But we just need to cope with all of our symptoms and move on, grow up, push through, get over it already. You're probably just getting older, man. Hello, gaslighting, my old friend. I know you well. For a long time, I believed 2 things about my symptoms. One, a lot of this was probably just my personality. I thought I'd simply gotten a raw end of the deal in the brain department as a fairly not happy human. I was an irritable person, sluggish, lazy, neurotic, unmotivated to exercise, and kind of a bummer to be around. A therapist once told me I was tightly wound. This is who I was. And number 2, my body just can't deal with the world the way most other people can. I'm excessively triggered by life, toxins, stress, etc. More than the average human. A highly sensitive person, or HSP, as the Instagram world will affirm. At one point, I found myself weeping to a former CEO, worried that my body was literally incapable of coping with regular work any longer. Maybe past trauma makes me more prone to stress and disease than others, but again, kind of a raw deal all around. Thing is, though, these symptoms didn't feel normal to me. Something in me knew there was a different Brandi in there somewhere, a Brandi that could access joy, a Brandi that felt lighter and had more energy, a Brandi that didn't feel anxious or constantly stressed and worried or stuck beneath the weight of a truck when I woke up every morning, physically, spiritually, or emotionally. A Brandi that had something more to give. So I wasn't willing to accept all of my symptoms as a normal part of aging, culture, or life in general. Something felt wrong and I knew it. My main job became tracking down what that something was. To that end, I tried nearly every healing modality that exists. MRIs, PPIs, blood tests, acupuncturists, naturopaths, mushrooms, allergy tests, lung doctors, salt caves, every diet imaginable, supplements, heavy metal detox, candida killing, meditation, massage, talk therapy, EMDR therapy, chiropractic, float tanks, herbalism, fermentation. Much of it did help, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was throwing darts at a wall, completely guessing, hoping I might, at best, alleviate the severity of my symptoms plaguing my daily life, but never necessarily addressing any sort of root cause. Until a handful of months ago, when a few things happened simultaneously. The night I launched the podcast, a group of people came over to celebrate with me, including my friend Lauren. It was Tuesday night in mid-September. That Thursday, I took a book with me on a solo camping trip. My first of the season and a welcome break from all the work of launching the show. The book was No Pressure, No Diamonds from Terry A. Dillian, gifted to me by my friend Kim only a couple weeks before Terry passed away from ALS this October. Terry's story, the account of her long health journey, mirrored so much of my own, even if I wasn't suffering from ALS. Her path through various healing modalities, her symptoms, her life in Colorado. and as it turns out, her mold issues, and a last ditch effort to see a dentist. Reading the book, lying alone in the back of my car out in the wilderness, I broke out into immediate tears when she and her husband realized they were living in a home full of mold, and they were immediately selling their house. And I repeated that. Hold on. When her and her husband realized they were living in a home full of mold and that they were selling their house and getting rid of everything they owned so Terry might have a better chance at healing. Something mystical happened in the back of that car, and I knew it was the universe telling me I was about to admit something very hard and very life-altering. When I returned home, I texted Lauren to tell her. I knew there was black mold in my home, and I'd been ignoring it for too long, concerned at the financial implications of remediating the problem. Her return text, when I came over the other night for your launch party, I had a mold response, and I wasn't sure how to tell you until now. That's when it all became clear. Lauren had been undergoing an expensive series of dental surgeries, exactly like Terry had hoped to do. Their procedures only performed by biological dentists and deemed highly controversial by the rest of the dental community. I'd listened along as she kept me up to speed on parts of it and watched as chronic health symptoms began to fall off of her, even as she struggled to detox after the removal of infections in her mouth. What exactly was there in her mouth? Lauren's lingering infections existed under every prior root canal and wisdom tooth extraction site. They'd stayed there, seeping infections into her jaw, an area where blood flows straight into the rest of your body the whole time. What kind of infections? Well, for starters, black mold. And in the newsletter, which I'll link to, I include an image of one that she had removed, one of her infected teeth, which she gave me permission to share. And that was what was in there, along with a whole host of other necrotic infectious bacteria nearly breaching her sinus cavity. I stumbled talking there just because I have several links to each of those things in the newsletter. Again, I'll link to it. But dental cavitations, as they're called, happen in one of two ways. Thanks to Lauren for this info. Number one, improperly extracted teeth, especially wisdom teeth, where the overwhelming majority of dentists don't properly remove your teeth. They actually leave behind ligaments and other particles in the surgical site, which impedes healthy bone from growing in, which later becomes an infection site without oxygen and proper blood flow. Zero oxygen and improper blood flow in a warm, moist environment creates the perfect environment for nasty pathogens to flourish and for the immune system to be able to solve it. Number two, root canal treated teeth. Root canals are typically done when a tooth has decay or infection that go all the way down to the nerve. Studies show that root canal treated teeth still contain infection 100% of the time after treatment and supposed sterilization. That infected tooth is also cut off from oxygen and proper blood flow in a warm, moist environment, so nasty pathogens flourish and the immune system isn't able to solve it there either. But why don't you know about it? They're referred to as silent killers because they leave a hole in the jawbone, cannot be detected by standard x-ray equipment, and don't produce any oral pain because the nerves where your tooth once was is now dead. You can't see them either because your mouth eventually forms a thin film over the hole where the dead tissue and trapped bacteria linger. So you move on completely unaware that they exist. Until, like me, you might mysteriously begin to develop symptoms elsewhere, like allergies, like anxiety, like thyroid malfunction, like gut issues, like heart problems, like a whole slew of autoimmune disorders, Lyme disease, MS, or lupus, anybody? Pain, or disease, and your other organs as well. I mean, do you know what meridians of the body in Chinese medicine are connected to your wisdom teeth? Your liver. By the way, I left out kind of a large part of my story where the use of dirty instruments during my wisdom teeth removal gave me hepatitis C at the at the time incurable liver virus, right? Which I was thankfully cured of in 2017. But that's a huge part also of like how the wisdom teeth impacted my autoimmune health. In any case, more things like they impact your thyroid, your heart, your small intestine, and your central nervous system. Those are all things that are connected directly between the meridians between your wisdom teeth and those places, right? So I'm not sure if it's evident by now, but each of those areas are associated with my specific autoimmune symptoms, right? So I finally booked an initial consultation with a local biological dentist, someone who specifically has a 3D cone beam x-ray to see the entire mouth. Surely enough, we found dental cavitations at all 4 sites where my wisdom teeth were extracted. That's when I knew, like Terry, it was time to do what I feared. get rid of the mold, sell my house to afford the dental procedures, and begin the long, often expensive process of removing all forms of toxic load on my body. Toxins we all encounter every day. Poor indoor air quality, lead, and other metals in our water, damaging ingredients in our body care products, and so much more. And I want to add here a thing that I did not write in the newsletter, which again, I think one of the toxic loads on your body, like I said, is not doing work that you love. When you are continually drained because you're doing shit that you don't enjoy and you're not giving the gifts that you're here to give, I think that is a form of toxic load. So I'm not saying that like doing that will heal all of illness ever, right? That's not my contention here. What I am saying is that one of the ways that your body has a toxic load constantly on it is if you are disconnected from the things that you actually want to be doing and the things that you're here to give. So that's my aside. But continuing on in what I wrote. I've also begun work on what is apparently an underdeveloped mouth and jawbone affecting my airway, tongue, and breathing. Turns out not having a vaginal birth and not breastfeeding often lead to smaller mouths and airways in children, which can lead to a whole host of other problems, including lack of oxygen at night, a contributing cause and what we're finding in the lead factors of Alzheimer's, sleep apnea, ADHD, and a whole host of other issues. Still, do I know for sure that this is a real, legitimate, or worth it? No. In fact, as soon as I wrote this newsletter, I had a friend reach out to me whose husband does root canal extractions for a living. He's an endodontist. And she begged me to talk to him to not think about doing this procedure and giving away my house. So I'm living with every possible contradiction and doubt. And still, this is the direction I'm deciding to go. Because like I said, I'm not a doctor, but after putting my faith in every possible remedy already, it's hard not to feel like this could be one more expensive and emotionally exhausting try in a long line of half helpful measures. But I have become what feels like a relative expert in my own health. And I finally feel like I found a missing corner piece of the puzzle. Do I think that removing my dental cavitations will immediately resolve my health issues? No, because I don't think that's how bodies work, you guys. Disease happens over time, and so does healing. Actually, sometimes things get worse before they get better as your body detoxifies from a lifetime of infection. I think the same might happen to you. If you quit your job, you might feel terrible, right? And again, I'm not just here to tell everybody to quit their job. That's not my purpose. But I think sometimes we just feel worse. Like I think our bodies take time to detox, right? From all the things that we've been loading it down with, including work that doesn't make us come alive. Regardless, continuing on. Do I even think that the surgery will eventually cure every chronic symptom I have? Probably not. Things aren't usually that simple, especially when it comes to our bodies again. But do I think there's an awful lot of evidence telling me I might have just found a way to plug a lot of the holes in my leaky boat, as Lauren often says? Yes. Is it worth selling my home in order to afford the process? I mean, I heard the other day, again, that Alzheimer's, which my grandmother had, and which I'm likely to develop as well without proper prevention, costs the average person $350,000 between diagnosis and death. I heard that on a Revolution Health Radio podcast. I'll try to link to that also. Cat's moving again. Here we go. Keeping the computer on. There we go. I'll include a link to that podcast in this show. It costs the average person around $350,000 between diagnosis and death. And if treatment of my dental cavitations, airway work, supplements, and other related support end up costing me even a third of that, which they won't even come close to costing, while also giving me a higher quality of life until I die, like I count that as a major win. Plus, I mean, what's your own life worth to you, right? I'm totally convinced, again, that being healthier would unleash my capacity to not only live a much more full, rich, energized life for myself, but will also unleash my highest capacity to give what I'm here to give. And I don't care much else other than those two things. So if that's not worth every dollar I have, leveraging every privileged asset I have to give it a shot, then I don't know what is. And do I think that if, like me, you've spent a lifetime hunting for explanations for your ongoing health issues, it might be worth taking a closer look at your mouth? Absolutely. Yes, friend. Your life and your vitality are worth everything as far as I'm concerned. And the answers could very well be hiding underneath your teeth. So I also feel like I should caveat that I found something the other day by Terry Wall, who's someone who healed herself from MS actually by changing her diet and doing some other things. Again, I'll link to that. There's an episode I heard her again in the Revolution Health Radio podcast where she talks about that. And she sent out a newsletter recently that I loved where she said, do not obsess over whether you can afford functional medicine. Obsess over learning how to cook at home. Obsess over eating what is recommended and eliminating what is harmful. Obsess over what is in your control. Participate in support groups online and in your community to share your experiences and strengthen your resolve, and let go of what you cannot do or access. And I think in a conversation where I'm talking about selling my house in order to afford something that's this expensive, and it's that expensive, by the way, only because generally dental work is about that expensive, as expensive as it's going to cost me anyway. But because, like I said, it's controversial in the dental world, it's not something that's covered by insurance. So you have to pay for everything totally out of pocket. So again, go do all of your own research, but I'm not saying, one, this is a miracle cure, that this is even going to work for me. I have no idea. Or that, like, if you don't have any sort of asset that's as big as your house in order to take care of it, that you can't actually care for your own health. I don't think that's true at all. But I do think it's important. I want to spread the story and let you in on how the process goes and whether or not it helps me, because I think that, like me, again, I said, I've been trying to do all this work around chronic illness and my health for so long now. And if there's any chance that it actually removes one more toxic thing in my body, like, it might not be the whole picture, but it actually might be a pretty big piece of the picture. And then, of course, I think I've got to do some more work on my thyroid and everything else. So in any case, I wanted to give you that context before going into this conversation with Charles and Lauren, because we talked so much about that procedure and dental health and, varying things that are related to chronic health and purpose. Maybe I'll close with one thing. It's a Charles quote from his book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, which is, I, like many others, felt a wrongness in the world, a wrongness that seeped through the cracks of my privileged, insulated childhood. I never fully accepted what I had been offered as normal. Life, I knew, was supposed to be more joyful than this, more real, more meaningful, and the world was supposed to be more beautiful. We were not supposed to hate Mondays and live for the weekends and holidays. Yeah, and there's another part down the page where he says, when the conscious mind cannot find a reason to say no, the unconscious says no in its own way. Which, again, is one way that I think our bodies make ourselves sick in order to tell us that something is off. And that's the deal. I think I've lived, like I said, so much of my own life feeling like there had to be more. There was just more. I knew there was more. There was more than being on this hamster wheel. There was more than waking up every day and just like earning a paycheck. And I've never really been that kind of person. I've always tried to do stuff that was deeply meaningful to me. So even when I chose full-time work, it was stuff that, like, I, at least to some degree, could care about and thought was important. I mean, I spent a lot of my life doing nonprofit work, and social justice things. So I've always really deeply cared about it. But I just think that we're, like, at a point in human history. Like, so I see something happening, which is like the Adrienne Marie Browns of the world who are, teaching us about pleasure, and all of her mentors who taught her about pleasure and how, social justice has to be the most pleasurable act there is, and things like that. I think that's a Tony Cade Bambara quote. I'm going to try to link to that and find that when I do the show notes. But I just think that there's all these, I think we're turning toward, and even like the nap ministry, right? I think that, like, is her name Trisha? I think it's Trisha Hersey, who's the one who runs the nap ministry. I just think that there's all these people here who are like doing, like, giving their gift in the world, and their gift in the world is part of what's, like, pointing at what's off. And part of what's off is that we are overworked, under-rested, operating in this, like, capitalistic machine where, again, like, it's not just capitalism. It's an interest-based economy that, like, sets us up to not thrive. It sets the planet up to not thrive. In fact, it just depletes all of us. And so I think folks like the NAP Ministry and Adrienne Marie Brown and all these people are here to help us see what is so deeply off. And people like Charles, of course, who are going, not only is it philosophically off, but literally as an economic system, this doesn't work. It's making us sick, it's killing us, and it's eventually going to die because that system cannot sustain the amount of resources necessary in order to continue capitalism and an interest-based economy. Like at some point it has to die. And so I would like us to help turn that tide before it kills us. And I want you to make that decision, to make a decision toward what makes you come alive before ignoring it kills you. And I feel so convinced that it will happen in some way. Like it manifests in some way. Spiritual sickness, divorce, depression, cancer, like it will be there until you pay attention. And I want you to turn and pay attention before it's too late. Before it's too late for you and before it's too late for us. Okay, friend? That's my partial, impassioned, off-the-cuff speech about why I talk about purpose so much and some context going into the next episode with Charles and Lauren about purpose plus illness. I hope that resonated with you some. I'm just going back to this quote from Resmaa Nakeem, I think is how you say it. I heard on the On Being podcast also once, who says trauma decontextualized in a person looks like personality. Trauma decontextualized in a family looks like family traits, and trauma in people looks like culture. I think we are a people that look like the trauma and the culture that we're in are normal, and it is deeply not normal. It is time to say that this is not normal. This is not normal. It is not normal for the amount of people in our on our planet to have autoimmune disease. This is like unprecedented. There's literally like not a friend I know basically that doesn't have some sort of autoimmune condition, thyroid malfunction, gut dysbiosis, like cancer. I mean, everyone I know, like when I write about this, I have more people pop out of the woodworks that go like, oh my, I had a friend text me the other day who read this podcast or read my newsletter about wisdom teeth and chronic illness, who was like, oh my God, I've just been diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, which I didn't have before. And, you know, I have a suspicion that like the fact that we're getting ravaged by a global freaking virus has something to do with how much our internal systems are not at a place where they can cope with that as easily. Like, I think we are literally dying. We have been made sick by a society that we think is normal, but is totally not normal. And we're putting Band-Aids on it. And I'm not going to get into vaccines, but I think there is one way of looking at a vaccine that is like a Band-Aid. The way that we treat our medical industrial complex is that you go into a doctor's office and the doctor tells you that what you're experiencing is pretty normal. Like cancer is normal, thyroid stuff is normal. You know what? So instead, we're just going to give you a pill and you're going to be on that pill for the rest of your life. You're going to be on hormone therapy for the rest of your life, or we'll cut your thyroid out and you'll still be on on hormone therapy because your thyroid's gone now. Simon's moving the computer again. Here we go. I'm just trying to travel with it. But like, instead of telling you this is not normal, people, like we need our doctors and our people to be like, it's not normal that this many people are not equipped internally, physically to deal with a virus. Like viruses are generally a normal part of human history. They serve an adaptation purpose. Asia Dorsey talks about that a bit in my conversation with her on microbes plus spirituality. Like we are meant to be able to physically cope with getting a virus and then passing it through us. But like, we're not. We live in a society that tells us that like, this is totally normal, keep existing within the normal, and just take a thing that will like eradicate your symptom, but actually isn't getting at the underlying cause. It is maddening to me. And I have just started to see that, like Charles said, like, I just know I've been a person born into a feeling that this is not normal. We do not live in a normal society where this many people are sick, this many people have disease. The planet is dying. And we're just supposed to sit here in jobs that we don't love and just like watch it happen and watch like social unrest happen as though it's just like freaking normal, right? This is not normal. I want us to say this is not normal. Like practice saying this is not normal, right? Like, and refuse to stop treating the symptom. When you were taking coffee, like when you were drinking coffee, when you were shooting yourself, like Charles said, with stimulants that help motivate you to go to your job every day, which is a place where you spend most of your time, that is treating a symptom and not the cause. I am begging all of us to start treating the cause, the underlying cause of the roots of what are making us sick, and to stop ignoring it. Because again, that separation between what we know is not normal and how we're behaving is part of the separation that's killing us. I want us to build intimacy so much with ourselves that we're willing to look internally and go, what do I actually want to do? What would actually be honoring what feels like I am made for and I'm here to give and that excites me to give to other people and I can't wait to be unleashed on the world? Like, ask that question and build intimacy with yourself so that you're no longer ignoring the bells in your head and in your body that are telling you that something is off. This is not normal, friend. Your body is telling you this is not normal, and we have to start actually treating the underlying cause of that. And part of that, like I said, is leaning deeply into your purpose and finding out how the real story, I think I didn't say this earlier, but what I was going to go with earlier was talking about how Charles often talks about living into a different story. And we have been living in a story where this is the normal, right? We've been living in a story where it's necessary to keep going to a job every day in order to do what we hate, in order to make enough money to live. But I think that the way that the universe actually works, and I'm starting to try to prove that theory myself, if anything, I just hope to be some sort of tiny model for other people that, like I said, is not like ahead or behind you, but like alongside you, maybe just one step in the process, holding your hand for dear life, going, I'm also scared about poverty and not making enough money and the next mortgage payment I have to make, right? I'm scared that not having a full-time paying job right now and just continuing to lean into believing that like doing what I love will actually support me. And that like, maybe if this podcast and this work is a gift to you, that you might gift to me so that I might keep doing it. Because I think when I do that, you get to do it too. And then other people support you in doing what you give. Like, I think that there is like some sort of actual truth that the nature of the universe is one that when you start doing work that makes you come alive, that resources flow to you, you are more creative, you're more open to ways to make money. Like all of these things start to happen when you actually start doing that. If you just brave the very first step into the wilderness of going, I'm not sure what this is going to look like. I don't know exactly how I'm going to make money, but what I do know is that like we are living on a planet and in a world that is dying. And I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my body to that cause. I'm no longer willing to do that. So as much as this is scary, it feels scarier to me to continue living in that way and to die without having given what I'm here to give in hopes of merely paying my bills. That is such an empty life of what I think we are here. Like it's an empty version of a life that I think we're here to give. And it's just like, we have to stop pretending that it's normal. We just have to stop pretending. I can't say it enough. You're dying. I'm dying. We're dying without it. Please choose otherwise. Please give your gift. That's all I've got. I hope this meant something to you. And I hope that gives great context in going to the conversation with Charles and Lauren. It will come out 2 weeks from when I release this episode. It's such a pleasure to get to talk to you. As always, please sign up for my newsletter. It's at thisplusThat.com/newsletter. Episodes to show notes will be in thisplusThat.com/episodes under the title of this episode, which I think is going to be Why I Talk About Purpose. And yeah, join my text community. Give to me if you want to support this work. Like I said, that's on my website. You can do that on my website as well under a link called Mutual Aid. Rate the show, subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. do all the things, right? Like those are all ways that aren't even necessarily financial, that are ways that keep me being able to do this work, which again, I just like literally can't see another way to live any longer. I can't, like, I'm at a point, like like I said, when I was talking with my friend Stephanie, my mutual friend, who was talking about being a doula, I was like, I genuinely at this point can't imagine going back to full-time work or even running my own branding and marketing business again. Like there's so much joy and fulfillment in doing this work. And I hope that you find joy and fulfillment and gift in it for yourself as well. And then it adds value and meaning to your life. That's genuinely all I hope for. Whether you ever support me financially or not, know that you mean everything to me, and you doing what you're here to do means everything to all of us. All right. Until next time, friend.